More and more middle schoolers and high schoolers have been using products that are used in vaping, and they're taking some of that to school, e-cigarettes, and they're often, or can be at least, disguised as like flash drives or cell phone chargers, and it can make it really difficult for teachers to keep a handle on it. Here to talk about the uptick in vaping in the school and on public grounds is attorney Clarence Dass from the Dass Law Firm. Clarence, thank you so much for joining us. So first, for people, most of us know what vaping is, but for those who may not be familiar with it, what is vaping?
Well, the best way to describe it is a merge between a hookah and a cigarette. It really is an e-cigarette that sometimes contains nicotine and sometimes doesn't, but the difference is this one looks like any other product we'd use in our normal lives, like you said, flash chargers, cell phone chargers, USB drives and things like that, and kids are starting to use them in school and libraries and other public places.
Now, can they use vaping products in school? I mean, at first blush, you would go, well, no, they can't smoke in school, right?
That's the idea that most of us have grown up with, but the reality is they are. And schools have tried to find some way to punish them for smoking in the classroom, for smoking in the bathroom, as the old song goes. But they can't, because there's no Michigan law right now that prohibits vaping in schools or even other public places.
So you said there's no Michigan law, but are there some communities that have made some rules about this?
There are, and so communities like Sterling Heights and other places in Macomb County have had an uptick in the rise of vaping products in schools, and they have passed local ordinances, but they're the equivalent of traffic tickets. So a kid will get a ticket for having a vaping product or vaping in schools, and they'll mostly have to do is pay a fine. It's different from actually having a criminal case or a criminal conviction, like a minor in possession charge, for example, for doing it.
Well, what would the charge be, for instance, if the child had a cigarette? Is it the same type of charge, basically a ticket?
It is, but they stack them up. So the more times you do it, then it becomes a misdemeanor, a crime. In the case of vaping, there's no way to really punish someone other than pay a fine, and it doesn't show up on a record. There's no way to really hold someone accountable for it. And the legislator doesn't want to hold people accountable, but they do want to teach kids a lesson that shouldn't continue in the future.
Now, you mentioned that e-cigarette is kind of a cross between a hookah and a cigarette. That sort of matters, right? Because it may not always contain nicotine, and there's a key difference in the law?
That's correct. So the law, even just a few years ago, changed to allow vaping in public places. It doesn't allow, however, places where that vaping contains nicotine, because that's just the equivalent of smoking. So you can't do it in restaurants if it contains smoking. But the law has not caught up to schools, libraries, and other places where families and kids are often going.
So if a child has a e-cigarette device, but it doesn't contain nicotine, that's why they can't be sort of hit with the cigarette type of charge.
Right, and it's technically legal, and you and I were talking off here a few minutes ago, some of the flavors that these kids are using are bubblegum, peanut butter and jelly, and all kinds of things, and they may smell good, but they also may contain nicotine.
All right. Well, there's a lot for parents to think about. The big advice, though, is to encourage for parents to encourage their students to leave that stuff at home, if they do it at all. Clarence Dass, thank you so much for joining us and educating us about the developing controversy between e-cigarettes and the classroom.